Alright, good evening and welcome. This is Obi-Wan Pez for N Simplex Pachinko. How's everybody doing tonight? Alright, so I've got a couple little interesting things that I came across this week while we wait for anybody else who might be coming in to ask any questions. So I was kicking around online between between our sessions here, and I came across a computer verification software for proofs. And it was, well, it was a bit surprising. I don't know if I exactly knew what to expect with it. But this is called, I need to add a source here. That's not what I want. Right, so last week after I had talked a little bit about Project Euler, I had, yes, I want to remove that. Right, just a window capture. Anyway. Here we go. Let's knock this down on the priority list. Okay, so after I'd come across, or after I had started working on Project Euler, I found this sitting around in one of my random article or tweet or something like that about it. So what we have here is, this is called the Xena project, and the Xena project is to, the entire point is to get mathematicians, especially undergrads, using computer proof verification software. The one that they mostly use is called Lean, and currently they have mathematic questions which essentially become like a coding video game. So the Xena project used to meet at Imperial College in Cambridge, and that was before this whole COVID thing happened, but now they're mostly doing a whole bunch of their work and meetings on Discord, and the general idea is that once they're done, they're going to attempt to show the resulting database to an AI system and see if it can become a mathematics expert. I think that that is pretty awesome. So I did my graduate work a little bit in, I had one class in, and then I used some of that work in subsequent projects in future classes, but I took one class in neural networks, and that was just a real big eye-opening moment for me, to see just this really awesome work that was being done. So anybody, not just Imperial first years, but anybody can try out the natural number game, which I have in another window here, or in another tab. And install Lean and the mathematics library into your computer, math lib up here, or you can try Lean online. So this is mostly for people who are like pretty well practiced at doing mathematical proofs. The natural number game is not something you have to have experience for. It more or less teaches you how to code using this proof verification software as you go through it. So I'm going to switch here to when you first get into it, this is the Natural Number Game version 1.3.3 by Kevin Buzzard and Mohammed Pedramfar. The basic idea, again, is to show the power of induction and using this proof verification software in trying to prove basic properties for mathematical objects. You go into tutorial world first. Technically, you could enter any of this stuff if you want to, but you won't necessarily have the skills, knowledge, etc. to get there yet. So, in the tutorial world, the first one is to show you how to do reflexivity. So, in math speak, when you show reflexivity, this is when something equals itself. There we go. So, here we see x times y plus z is equal to x times y plus z, and you can use that reflexivity on that. However, x plus y equals y plus x is not reflexive, and so here you would have to use a couple more properties to get it all the way there. So when you go to the bottom here, this would actually be filled in with something that says just sorry, and you'd see the goal up top here. So we have currently x times y plus z equals x times y plus z. So then you just fill in the bottom part here with reflexive, R-E-F-L, comma. Once you do that, it ends this particular segment and says it checks your proof and make sure that it's correct. As you go through, there are multiple steps you have to take. So in this particular case, you have x plus 7, y equals x plus 7 is your goal, and you currently have 2 times y equals 2 times x plus 7. So in this particular case, we just have to rewrite the original as if it were, or rewrite the original as h. So the rewrite command RW can be filled in there, and then reflexive after that gets you the proof complete. So after each step, you can double check what it's been doing. Normally, oh, there we go. Right. If y is equal to x plus 7, it replaces the y on the left with x plus 7, and now you have a reflexive statement. So in the Peano axiom here, we see that we have successive a equals b, so therefore we need to show that successive of successive a is equal to successive b. And again, rewrite, it says successive b is successive b, and then solve, or make it reflexive. So anyway, once you get out of the tutorial world, then you have to show how addition works. And in this case, we use something called induction. So inductive proofs allow you to say if it works at the base level. So for an initial case, usually for n equals 1, then we assume that it's going to work for some future value n, and you have to show that it works for n plus 1. When you do that, awesome stuff happens. So you're able to show that for any n value in the future, this property, whatever it is going to hold. And good evening, Bugled. And of course, Lana. So there are some fun little proofs about individual things that you can find using in proof by induction. I'll just throw one out there that's not a part of Project Xena, just because it's kind of fun. I like doing it. Going to mute this. whiteboards are coming up. All right, let's gonna take a while. Here we go. All right. So we're going to do a basic proof by induction. In this particular case, we can show that, let's say, let's do one here. The sum of triangular numbers, or the sum of integers, going from, just undo that. Okay, so an example of proof by induction that's really very powerful and very awesome is what Carl Friedrich Gauss had discovered when he was a boy. He was a young man in school in Germany, and he discovered this formula. It was already well known by this point, so he was around in the 1800s, but he discovered it on his own in his own math class. One day when his teacher got sick of him being annoying and probably not paying very much attention because he already knew how to do all this stuff, his teacher said, just add up all the numbers 1 to 100, just go. And Gauss then started looking at different ways of figuring out how to add up the numbers 1 to 100. Most other school boys, probably the teacher was expecting, would do something like this and say, okay, 1 plus 9 is probably 10, and then 2 plus 8 is 10, and we can get some 10s here, and then we got to go on to the 20s, or onto the teens, and then we got to go on to the 20s, and onto the 30s. Well, Gauss did pretty much what I just said, except he decided that instead of adding up 1 to 9 to make 10, and it would be pretty easy to do that, he said, if I start with 1 and I go all the way down to the bottom of my list to 100, add those up, I get 101. And then if I also do 2 and 99, I also end up with 101. 3 and 98, 4 and 97, 5 and 96. You see where this is going. We get all 101s throughout all of this. And then how many pairs are there? Well, you can see that by going to the middle. So here, they all add up to 101. So 49 would be here, and 52 would be here, and 50 here with 51 there. So this loops our list around. These all add up to 101 as you keep going. And there are how many pairs? Well, you just count using this list here. So there are 50 pairs. Of 101. So 50 times 101 ends up being 5,050. So Gauss came back to his teacher with his slip of paper. The teacher said, "You have a question?" And Gauss said, "No, I'm done." And handed him the slip of paper that had 5,050 written on it, and all of his working, and the teacher was suitably impressed, and also kind of flabbergasted that a young boy granted probably early teens, had figured this out on his own. Gauss then went on to discover many, many more things, including a lot of the electronics and electricity and how it all works with mathematics. There are a large number of mathematical concepts named after him, including the unit, the Gauss, which has to do with strength of magnetic fields, and therefore electric fields as well. In terms of this thing, he was, when he got older, able to prove inductively that this works. So for induction, you have to show that this works for n equals 1. So, the initial case. What happens when n is 1? Well, it says that the sum is going to be equal to 1 times 1 plus 1 over 2 is going to be 1 times 2 over 2, which is just going to be 1. So, the sum of the number 1 is equal to 1, which, okay, that seems pretty obvious, but this is the power. We're going to assume that this works for some n value. Now, at the moment, n is equal to 1. Now we have to show that this works for n plus 1. This does not mean you get to plug in n plus 1. What this means is that we have the sum of the first n numbers equal to n times n plus 1 divided by 2, and that is given. Then, if we want to add the number n plus 1, we have to literally add n plus 1 to both sides, or the result of n plus 1 to both sides. Something. In the case of many of the other inductive proofs, it's not this simple. We're not just going to add n plus 1. Now we have to prove that this is going to get us the same thing as this, but advanced one step. So this n out front needs to be n plus 1. This n plus 1 here needs to be n plus 2. And then this 2's got to stay the same. So in order to make sure that this actually works, do s sub n plus, parentheses n plus 1, is going to be equal to n times n plus 1 over 2 plus, here we're going to have a 2 times n plus 1 divided by 2 in order to add the fractions together. They have to have the same denominators. So we bring these together. This is then going to be on the left the sum sub n plus 1. Right. It's behind my head. I know better. You think I'd know better by this point. Come on. Really? Okay. Let's try that again. Okay, here we go. So the left-hand side becomes s sub n plus 1. Again, all we're doing is adding the next integer, because that was the idea of what we were trying to do, the sum of all integers from 1 to n. Now we're trying to show that it works for the sum of all integers 1 to n plus 1. So s sub n plus 1, we're just adding the next integer, is the sum out to n plus 1. And then here we have to recombine this in order to get, like I said, that goal of increasing our n to n plus 1 and n plus 1 to n plus 2. So we're going to multiply all this out. This is n squared plus n plus over here 2n plus 2 all divided by 2. Next, these are going to combine the middle terms. We get n squared plus 3n plus 2 all divided by 2. And this factors. N squared plus 3n plus 2 is going to factor into, because we have 2 as our a times c value, the only option here is 1 times 2. The larger number is going to be positive, and they have to be the same. So therefore, both have to be positive, and they add up to 3. So, good times. Salt is easy. Good evening. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, let me know, because I'm kind of just waiting on somebody to come up with something other than whatever I feel like talking about. So the top here is going to factor into our 2 parts, n squared plus 1n plus 2n, which actually we had that at the last step too, so we could have just done it from there. This is then going to be n times n plus 1 plus 2 times n plus 1, which breaks into n plus 1, n plus 2. All right. Oh, yeah, it was already factored at the beginning. Right here. Could have just left it. Oh, man. Woo! So when we factor all this out, we get n plus 1 times n plus 2 all over 2, which was what I'd said we needed to prove. If you're not sure if you're going to believe me, that's perfectly fine. S sub n plus 1 is equal to, here we have just n plus 1, and here we have n plus 1 plus 1. So now it is literally exactly like the original formula that we had over here. I gotta stop leaning that way. Keep putting myself out of frame. Alright, so now it's the same form as what we had back here. Again, we advance n one more space. Nice. Well, welcome to it. And if you're at all interested, there is plenty more stuff in my VODs. They are all highlights, so you may have to look under the highlights section. Once they reach 30 days old, all the raw video gets canned. So, so there might be some stuff back there if you're interested. There's definitely some calculus stuff, but. So anyway, this works for s sub n plus 1, and therefore the formula s equals n times n plus 1 all over 2 is going to work for the sum of integers 1 through n. And that can go as far as we want it to go. So this is going to go all the way out to any finitely large value you would like to pick. All right. If there's anyone else out there who has questions, feel free and let me know. Otherwise, I've got plenty of other stuff I can talk about. I will say it has been a long time since I've done the Calc 2 stuff. That was fun. Trying to show that the sum of something is less than a particular value, in order to show that it's finite, in order to show that, yeah, I remember all that. It's also too bad my calculus book is currently sitting underneath my monitor. Which also means I'm not getting that out. College level, but I teach everything from basic algebra all the way through to differential equations, so there's a pretty wide spread. Most of my students are fresh out of high school. I've got a couple of students this semester who are basically my age, so that's kind of cool. You know, getting back to school after some years in the workforce and just want to do something different. It was really fun when I was 24, I think, when I first started. Nice. When I first started, I was, yeah, like I said, I was about 24, and I had a student who was a retiree who had just decided, like, I never really understood math that well, let me take it, and I'll go do, whatever I feel like. So she was like 72 and I was 24, and, I'm the expert in the room. Like, hey. It was an interesting dynamic, too, because, not between us, because she was perfectly happy with me being the teacher. But, the other students in the classroom are like, this is a little awkward being, having one of our peers be a retiree. But, it works once you get to know each other in the classroom. It's fine. Everything's fine. Any plans on taking math further on through whatever major or program you're getting into? Right, yeah. And I think really that's mostly the case. Is that we're just always assuming that everybody in our class is going to be our age and maybe a year or two older. Nice. Oh, I bet you're looking forward to actually seeing the campus as well. Yep, one of my colleagues went to, I think he went to, no, I can't remember if it was Cornell or Columbia. He's gonna hit me. Yeah, and a few of my other colleagues went to UPenn for graduate school. They loved it. Yeah, I've always been an East Coast boy. My brother's actually out in the West Coast now. He's hanging out it that way. Yeah. Yeah. It's not a. It's slightly better, but it's not a huge amount better. Mid-Atlantic, where we are, because you got all the cities like right in a row, right on the coast, and then you got Philly, Baltimore, DC, I mean Richmond, but yeah, Raleigh Durham. At least in Raleigh Durham, it's not that expensive, but um, especially Baltimore, D.C., that area, that gets a little much. But you got so many people who want to get jobs in the area, whether they're into politics or science or just about anything. They're very much interested in getting into the government agencies and having a fairly lucrative job. But yeah, definitely nothing like California. Just thinking like, what do I want to do? Yeah, I mean, you don't even have to live here. Just poke around, come see New York, come see DC. Oh yeah. I mean, let's be honest, I'm like slightly more than twice your age, and I, I still think I have plenty of time too. Uh, most of the time, it's true. And of course, this is me deciding to do some weird stuff online and hang out with people randomly and do math instead of just reading books into the night. Hmm. Either that or just too stubborn to grow up, which is always a plus. Oh, yeah. It was 5 years ago that I picked up an account, and because um, I was really into Geek and Sundry, and I picked up an account, or not this account, my name account, so Obi-Wan Pez. So I picked up that one, and I joined Project Alpha, which was part of the Geek and Sundry and Nerdist platform, and they had this big project to put like Critical Role and like a whole bunch of brand new tabletop RPG shows that they were doing. It was really cool, and I got kind of invested in that. And then the platform unfortunately just didn't have the base that they needed to keep it funded, so they dissolved it, and everybody just went back to Geek and Sundry and Nerdist and wherever else they were. But then we were like, well, where are you streaming? And they said, well, we're streaming on Twitch. And I'm like, all right. So I just joined up on there and just started watching all those shows. And then, here I am, 5 years later, and I've still got all the same stuff. It was 2 years ago. My brother and I went to AGDQ, and that was my first foray into like gaming. I mean, I've been a gamer forever, but first foray into game streaming, and I was just kind of like, I don't know if I'm really interested in watching people play games. And then we went to AGDQ, and the community that was there was just amazing. We watched them break the 3 million mark, I think it was, for the first time, and like just everybody went nuts, and we're all just like high-fiving each other and stuff like that. It was great. And then yep. And then my brother was like, "You should totally start speedrunning. And I was like, all right. I'm starting to get arthritis. Are you kidding me? He's like, no, just try it. So I did some Legend of Zelda. I did some random other stuff like that. The easier ones. Did some Astroneer because I was really interested in that game. And then it was only over the last year because of COVID that I was like, well, you know what? Let me actually start some other. Like I started posting my personal math videos under this account and Simplex Pachinko to show off kind of like what I've invented in mathematics. It isn't much. It's not really anything spectacular, but it helps some students learn better. So I consider it a win. And so I showed off these inventions. I've posted them here too. And then, I don't know, probably it was less than 6 months ago, I was like, well, screw it. Let's just start streaming and, show off some of this stuff live, have live feedback from people. And I don't know if there's like any particular ways that you have learned things that might be slightly different from the way I've learned things. And I kind of want to communicate. I want to communicate math education better to people. And that was, it's my specialty. Like, this is what I went to school for. I'm starting to become an expert in the field. Like, clearly this is what I should be streaming. And then I just mess around on Friday nights and play some games. So you're welcome to stick around for whatever you like. And and like I said, if there's anything that like you don't 100% understand, or like you think there might be a better way to think about something, let me know and we can start pounding out some interesting basically it's math research is what we're doing here. It's just at a very kind of simple level. So one of the things that I've been like really harping on, and anybody who's been here for any amount of time could tell you, is that I really, really, really want students to understand the deep level of mathematics. So, yep, thank you very much. I really want students to understand like the deep level of understanding of mathematics that they're supposed to be getting in school, and we as teachers are never really able to spend the time to like really help students understand that. So this is my platform. This is where I'm planning on being for the foreseeable future. Yeah, oh god, that was only like, wow. Yeah, I only started this like a month and a half ago. God, it feels like it's been forever already. Right, and here's the thing. I was also a high school teacher at one point. I was a high school teacher for uh, 1 quarter during my first year because I got hired on St. Patrick's Day. So the 17th of March, it was a Tuesday. I was there for the week to replace a technology teacher who was doing like a CAD project with his students. And I'm like, I don't know anything about this. They're like, whatever, you just need to sit there and like do some. I'm like, oh my god, really? Is this how we're doing this? And so I spent Monday basically just moping around in the technology department like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then Tuesday, I was like, my lunch break, I'm just going to spend it with the math people. So I went upstairs, I found the math room, and they're like, "Hi, who are you?" And I'm like, I'm the sub for tech, but I'm a math person, so I decided to come up here. And they're like, "Wait, you have a math degree? You have a math education degree? Come with us." And so the department chair took me straight off and marched me up to the assistant principal, pointed at me and said, "This guy's got a math degree. You should talk." So I was hired on the spot on St. Patrick's Day for my first year of teaching. And I got 3 months in, and then they were like, so we're losing 3 positions. I'm like, all right, cool. Guess that's me out then. And then I got a job at another school in a different district, which was a half hour away from my house, which the commute sucked. And yeah, I had the whole year, but at the end of the year, I was exhausted. The students didn't want to be there. I was starting to burn out already, just from the students not caring, and my department chair didn't like the way that I taught. So I was like, all right, well, you don't want me back, that's fine, I'm not coming back either. So I went to a community college nearby, and I said, you guys are looking for adjuncts, I'm interested. And they said, sure. And I taught my standard lesson for like quadratic formula for these people. It was 4 women who all were department or like coordinators for their individual courses in algebra, and they saw what I had to say, and they were like, this is brilliant, why don't we hire you on the spot? And I was just like, this is where I need to be. Clearly. So the first few years were kind of rough because it was more or less the same thing, right? You're adjusting to how the high school dynamic worked. You know, they're all essentially high school students coming right into college. And what I really cared about, what I really liked, was the fact that there were no parents breathing down my neck to be like, my child has to pass. Like, no. Your child's got to do the work. But for college, it was just like, I'm sorry, I cannot give you that information. Your child's under 18? Well, that's too bad. You've got to get them to sign a waiver that says you can talk to me, because I'm not going to talk to you. And it's these days it's encoded or codified into law that the Federal Education Protection, no, it's FERPA, but I don't remember what it all stands for. Yeah, so FERPA is the like Federal Education something Information Act, which is a lot like HIPAA for the Health Information Act. And I was also an EMT for 4 years, so I know a lot about that. So the FERPA law just said, you know, you don't have to share anything with parents because they're not entitled to that information. I was like, all right, cool, it's protected information. The attitude of the students was mixed. So you've got some students who are like, you know, high school, don't care, don't want to be here, whatever. And it's just kind of like, okay, I'll send you an email every week, and if you don't get it done, you're going to fail the course. Like, that's just how it is. Yeah, I mean, I was there too, eventually, at one point or another. So, especially when I first started, it was just kind of, you know, it was kind of the same as the high school that I taught at, right? It's more or less same population, just grown up a year. And yeah, the level of understanding is a bit mixed, because you've got students who know what they're doing and like dead set. All they have to do is basically just write up a couple of things and they're going to pass the course. Like, it's not an issue. And then you've got other students who really do not have any clue what they are doing because they were just passed on through high school over and over and over again, passed through math class after math class, even though they don't have any idea what they're doing. It's just because, you know, either the teachers needed numbers, or, you know, some of them it was just they cheated their way through. Some of them it was just that there's all sorts of people in every course. And it's an interesting dynamic, like I said. But I definitely like teaching college level and now especially, we're a 2-year college, and we're going through a period where our dean, who was appointed like 4 or 5 years ago now, um, our dean said, I'm really interested in getting a research publication off the ground. And the vice president of academic affairs, the president of the college were all just like, yes, absolutely, do that. And he just ran with it. So he got a whole bunch of us together in the math division and said, I need you to like start drumming up some ideas. And he does a class that's basically math proofs. And so he got a whole bunch of them together. And this is actually where my name came from, or the name of the channel came from. So, N-simplex pachinko is a bit of my research. I know those of you who have been here forever, I talk about this every month or so. But basically, he had a group of students who were looking at the Pascal triangle, which is this triangle that can show you, again, what happens when you get a plus b raised to the nth power. You're looking at all of the individual, yeah. So anyway, he got a whole bunch of students who were interested to look at the values in the Pascal triangle and try to figure out if there are any patterns that are there that are a little less obvious. And so he found a couple, or his students found a couple, and he got them to write up research papers and put them into a journal. And so our research publication now we're working on volume 4 for this year, I think, and students have worked on this particular, Pascal triangle stuff for years. One of his worked on the Pascal tetrahedron. So basically, you just figure out now for a ball that could go one of 3 ways, how many balls are going to stack up at the bottom level. And in doing so, you can come up with all of the coefficients that you get for a 3-dimensional shape like this. I was working on it as a slice across, so the slices that you see here, this was my research that I was doing at the same time that they were actually slicing the tetrahedron across its faces. Across its faces, you actually get a Pascal triangle just on the standard face, but then when you peel that layer back and dump it, the one below it is actually a linear function times the Pascal triangle. And then when you peel that back, it's a quadratic. And then when you peel that back, it's a cubic. Because every layer that you peel back, you keep adding successive, basically you add successive terms, and it creates this thing to be, creates this thing which is basically the same relationship as when you're looking at the integer values for a linear, a quadratic, a cubic, a quartic function. So I have actually commissioned a physical object to be created from our engineering department, which is going to be a 3-dimensional pachinko machine that uses this project. So the two-dimensional one would just be like a little pachinko board where you get balls that fall through it, and then they all end up making this binomial distribution. Well, the three-dimensional one is going to make a trinomial distribution, which is going to be essentially, it's going to look like that. It's going to be sort of almost like a normal curve, but rotated. So I had him purchase like, 100 ball bearings and make an extra large bottom piece that's going to collect all of them as they fall through. So hopefully, statistically speaking, this should work out to the numbers that I have calculated. Law of large numbers and all. So should eventually work out to be those. We'll see if it works. So I've also figured out that this works in any dimension. So if we increase this to, a six-dimensional simplex, this is going to be a hypertetrahedron in 6 dimensions, and it's going to show like all of the connections between if you have 6 terms added together, what you get when you raise that term to the nth power. So it's going to be really awesome. I hope. I've also been trying to work on Python to be like, okay, let's get a 6-dimensional representation of this thing. I've kind of let that go by the wayside for a bit just because I've got so much other work to do, but it should be interesting. I mean, part of that is just you're not used to the terminology. You haven't seen it before. Even some of my colleagues get glazed over a little bit when I start talking about it in depth, because I've spent like a year of my life in that space, essentially. Actually more than that now. It's been 2 to 3 years since I started the research that, I live in that space. So whenever I'm just idle, sometimes I play around and see what it looks like. Looks like. You can't do higher dimensional space, but you can try. Yeah, and if it's really awesome, it'll get published. All right. See you, salted. Sorry. Yeah, you too. Hope you have fun. Hope you get through the rest of this year unscathed. This has been a hell of a time. And look forward to seeing you here again, and we can get to talking about stuff some more. And like I said, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer anything mathematical, even if it's just like, something you saw in a research journal or whatever. Anyway, have a good night. All right. So that being said, let's play a little bit. Oh, I like this one. Alright, so this is something we use in differential equations a lot. And it's always, well, usually, pretty fun. So power series are a group of summations, infinite summations, which end up having terms c sub k, which are just constants. The constants are going to be different on every single term as we go through. And then we get a term that is x minus a raised to the kth power. So if we want our initial x value to be 0, this is one of the easiest forms that we can do this. We end up with just the summation as k goes from 0 to infinity of c sub k times x to the k. The x minus a becomes x minus 0. I guess technically that would be... let's get rid of this thing. Alright, so x minus x0 is a better way to write this. It makes it a little more obvious what this is. So the term x sub 0 is going to be our initial value. So we're going to pick some point somewhere in this space, and it's going to be centered around that point. In this particular case, again, let it be 0. So we're going to center our function around x equals 0. Again, our c sub k is going to be all of the possible coefficients. So this thing looks like c sub 0 x to the 0 plus c sub 1 x to the 1 plus c sub 2 x to the 2 plus c sub 3 x to the 3, etc. This being an infinite series, it will go on literally forever. Alright, so the power of this thing, note with no pun intended there, but anyway, is that we can use this to represent some other kind of behavior. So for instance, if we have all c sub k equal 1, then what we've got is k goes from 0 to infinity of x to the k. And we want to know what this thing looks like. This is going to be equal to, again, just x to the 0 plus x to the first plus x squared plus x to the third plus etc. all the way out to infinity. Now, you would look at this and say, well, this is going to increase the values, so they're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and go off toward infinity. That is true, unless your numbers were small to begin with. So how small? Well, if x is a large number, being very large, then raising it to successively higher powers is going to make it even larger. So at what point do these numbers stop getting larger with successive higher powers? Well, if you keep working your way inward, you find that even a number like 1.00000001 will increase as you increase its exponent. However, the number 1 stays exactly the same, and the number 0.999999999, for example, will actually become smaller and smaller and smaller. Only ever so slightly, but eventually it will become smaller, and as the exponent increases toward infinity, that number becomes ever so smaller and essentially zero. So our x value, the absolute value of our x value, must be less than 1 in order for us to have what is called a convergence. So we will get convergence if the absolute value of x is less than 1. All right, these numbers will eventually get smaller and smaller and eventually tend towards 0. So this becomes something really cool. As we go through this, this is also now discrete values because we're only using integers for k, and anyway. And if we look at the geometric series, sum as k goes from 0 to infinity of a times r to the n. Yeah. Anyway, we get the infinite series, which is 1 over, nope, a over 1 minus r, again, provided that absolute value of r is less than 1. So then we end up with the same deal as what's going on with x to the k, having an infinite series there. Well, this is just going to end up being, I kind of painted myself in a corner there. This ends up being infinite sum as k goes from 0 to infinity of x raised to the k is going to be 1 over, our a value is just going to be 1, and then 1 minus x. Oops, that should be a k, not an n. Alright, provided that absolute value of x is less than 1. We always keep having to put that there just to make sure that we don't forget anything, or we put in a value that we're not supposed to. Like, for instance, that ridiculous proof that the sum of all integers was equal to -1/12. Right? That is precisely what we are trying to prevent here. All right. So if we have an integer or interval of convergence, we can work on that. Then we can come up with a power series that also can reflect values that we get for other functions. So what Brooke-Taylor did was he said, okay, well, let's assume for the moment that there is an infinite series which will be equivalent to f of x. So whatever our function is, f of x, doesn't matter what it is at all whatsoever. He said if we have the sum, as k goes to from 0 to infinity, of c to the c sub k times x to the k, and again at the moment we're going to assume that this is going to be taken at x sub 0 equals 0. So rather than using this power series with the x minus x sub 0, we're just going to do x to the k and leave it there. So what he did was he said we've got c sub 0 x to the 0 plus c sub 1 x to the 1 plus c sub 2 x to the 2. C sub 2 x to the 2, that's not. And this continues on forever. Now, there is a 0 of this function, or not a 0, sorry. There is a particular value of this function which is going to be found by taking f at x sub 0, which in this particular case is f at 0. So what we're doing is we're looking for the y-intercept. So we're going to call that, I mean, do they just use? Yeah, that's fine. All right, so we're going to plug in 0 to this particular function. Well, this means that x to the 0 is just 1. We can ignore it at the moment. C sub 1 times x to the first is going to be 0 to the first. So this term is 0. And this term is 0. And every subsequent term after that is all 0. So we have zeros for all these terms except the first one. So f sub 0 is going to be c sub 0. Then he said, okay, let's do the same thing. This time we're going to do f prime at x sub 0 is going to be f prime at 0 in this case, which if we do the derivative of all these things, this is a constant, so it's gone. And then we go to the next term here. We take the derivative of a linear term. F prime at x is going to be c sub 1. Our linear term just goes away, becomes constant. We get here c2 times x squared. Take the derivative of x squared. It's 2x. So plus 2x, nope, 2c2x plus, and the next term after that is c3x to the third, which is going to then be, again, bring down your constant, 3 c3x squared plus, etc. But again, we're plugging in 0 for this on the next line, so all of the terms with x's go away and we're just left with c1. If we continue this, f double prime at 0, say f double prime at x is going to be equal to, again, we take the derivative here, this is 0, take the derivative here, it's going to be 2c2. Take the derivative here, it's going to be 6, 2 times 3, c3 x to the first, plus, next term over would have been 4c4 x to the third, which is now going to be 4 times 3 is 12, c4 x squared, plus, and then keep going. Again, we're taking this at 0, so all these terms are wiped out with x's, and then we're just left with 2c2. By following this pattern, our next term is going to have a 1 brought down and the x's are gone, so now it's 6c3. The fourth derivative at 0 is going to be equal to here we're going to take another 2 derivatives of this. So this is going to be 24 times 1 c4. f5 at 0 is going to be 120 c5, because again, this is going to bring down a 5, a 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1. And we're going to get 120. And we can keep doing this. This means that C0 is just going to be, let's reframe this, C0 is just going to be f at 0. C1, the constant, is going to be f prime at 0. C2 is equal to, this is where it slightly changes, C2 is equal to, we have to bring the 2 over, f double prime at 0 divided by 2. C3 is going to be f triple prime at 0 divided by 6. C4 is going to be f fourth derivative at 0 over 24. And C5 is going to be f fifth derivative. Oops. Did I? Yeah, I messed up. That's fine. This is fifth derivative. F fifth at 0 divided by 120. What are these numbers? Well, we're putting this over 1. We're putting this over 1. 1 is the same as 0 factorial. 1 is the same as 1 factorial. 2 is the same as 2 factorial. This is where it gets different. 6 is 3 factorial. 24 is 4 factorial. And 120 is 5 factorial. I'm off the page. At any rate, let's move that a bit. Yeah, I'm good. Okay. Yeah. There. And then this pattern's going to continue. So what we've got is that the nth term, or kth term, I guess, because we were doing k before, is going to be given by the kth derivative at that particular 0 value divided by the kth factorial. So these particular power series are called Taylor polynomials. And they represent all possible functions that you know how to take the derivative of. They work in a local area, and then as you get more and more and more terms, the local area upon which they are accurate continues to increase. Eventually, once you get an entire function or once you get the infinite series of the function, they are literally equivalent. So any function that you want to create, as long as it is differentiable, you can make a Taylor polynomial for that function. So the easy one that everyone always does is just f of x equals e to the x, right? Derivatives of e to the x are going to just be e to the x. So you're going to get something that is not a polynomial by itself, but you can actually get a polynomial out of this. So all of the derivatives, f, k, like that. There's probably a reason they don't use f and k in the same. Anyway, fk at x is always just going to be e to the x. And if we center at x equals 0 or x sub 0 equals 0, then what we end up getting is, again, follow this pattern. F of x will be equal to our c sub 0 is going to be the function at 0, which is 1, plus the derivative of that function, or times x to the 0, but still you get the point. Now we do c1, so take the derivative of that function, it's e to the x, plug in 0, it's 1, so then we get 1 times x to the first. plus c2 is going to be the second derivative, which is still e to the x, plug in 0, you still get 1, but now we divide by 2 factorial. So this is going to be 1 over 2 factorial x squared. Plus, you can see where this is going. The next one is just going to be 1 over 3 factorial x to the third plus 1 over 4 factorial x to the fourth plus 1 over 5 factorial x to the fifth plus, and this keeps going on forever. So, as large as we want to make our k values, we can keep increasing the number of terms that we have, and it's going to continue getting more and more accurate. And if you want to see that in action, you can always go to your calculator, plug this thing in, and show that, like, you know, e to the 1, right, should be 2.718281828459045, give or take, plus a little. So e to the 1, again, we're going to plug in f at 1. So we're just going to get 1 plus 1 plus 1 over 2 factorial times 1 plus 1 over 3 factorial times 1 plus, etc. So this is going to be 1 plus 1 plus 1 over 2 factorial. That's deep in here, isn't it? Yep. 2 factorial plus 1 over 3 factorial plus 1 over 4 factorial plus 1 over 5 factorial. All right, so I have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 terms, and my number comes out to be 2.716 repeated. So f at 1, using 6 terms, e to the first is going to be approximated by 2.716 repeated. So 2.718281828. Obviously we're off by 2 thousandths plus and minus a little bit. So okay, it's all right, but it's not super great. If we go out to, let's say, 10 terms, so we're going to get 1 over 9 factorial is our last one. So 1 over 6 factorial plus 1 over 7 factorial plus 1 over 8 factorial plus 1 over 9 factorial. If we use this, then we end up with 2.71828152557. So this makes it out to here before deviating. So we are accurate to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 decimal places and the initial value. If you want to know how accurate this is, you could always plug this into your calculator and say, all right, using what we've got, what's the percent error? So using the number that I have, I'm going to store that into just A. So I'm going to say that I want A minus the actual value for E, which the calculator knows, divided by E. So percent error is going to be negative. Oops, sorry. It's going to be a positive because it's the absolute value of this. Right? What's the difference between them, and then divide by the actual value. So this is going to be a 1.114 times 10 to the negative 7th, or 1.114 times 10 to the negative 5th percent. So, yeah, it's pretty accurate. Most of the time we want like a 1% error or something like that. So yeah, this works pretty well. You go out to 10 terms, it's pretty accurate. We're accurate out to 6 decimal places. Naturally, if we go further out away from this. So if we let x be 2 instead, then the error is going to also similarly increase because we're going further away from the point where we started. So this is 1 plus 2 plus 2 squared over 2 factorial plus 3 cubed over 3 factorial. Nope, I'm sorry. 2 cubed over 3 factorial plus 2 raised to the 4th power over 4 factorial plus 2 raised to the 5th power. We keep doing this, plus 2 raised to the 6th power over 6 factorial plus 2 to the 7th over 7 factorial plus 2 to the 8th over 8 factorial and 2 to the 9th over 9 factorial. Okay. If we do that, we get a particular value. Let's see how accurate this is. So f at 2, using 10 terms. Again, we're plugging it into this one, so f at 2 is equal to 1 plus 2 plus 2 squared over 2 factorial plus 2 cubed over 3 factorial plus etc. All right, so using 10 terms, we get it is approximately 7.3887125. Some more stuff from there. It is actually 7.389. 05609. More stuff. So again, we're accurate to now 2 decimal places exact, and then after that we're really close. All right, if we then similarly store the previous right, a minus e squared over the actual e squared that is not equal to, what am I doing there? Whew. Off by, and again this is going to be 4.6498 times 10 to the negative 5th, or percent error 4.64 times 10 to the negative 3rd. So it's still like really, really, really small percent error. It is significantly larger than the one above. So like 300 times bigger. Nope. 400 times bigger. Okay. Right, 400 times that one to get to that one. Anyway, roughly speaking. All right, so one of the reasons that that is a bit of a problem is because the distance, or the x values that we're plugging in, the x terms that we're getting now, are basically the distance between our centered value and the value we want to find. And so as these numbers get bigger, this will converge more slowly. So it'll take more terms to converge out to a certain number of decimal places in accuracy. Which is why it's actually more important, if you are going to do something like this, you're going to want to center this around a different value. So if we center this around x equals, right, e to the, I don't know, e to the 2nd power, that one's going to be real accurate. Let's just do e to the 1st. if we center this around e to the first, then what we get is f of x is going to have the exact same coefficients, because we found those coefficients by using the derivatives of the original function, e to the x. The only thing that's different is that we're saying here this is going to be 1 times x minus e to the first raised to the 0th power. Again, that's not going to be there. Plus x, nope, yeah, 1 times x minus e to the first power, plus, where am I? Okay. X minus e to the first squared over 2 factorial, plus x minus e to the first to the third, all over 3 factorial, and we go from there. The amount that we're actually raising to all of these powers, if we're trying to find, let's say, f at 2 again, so this is a separate thing. If we're trying to find f at 2 again, the distances here that we're just getting are all going to be a difference of e squared minus e, which is a lot closer than, oh, sorry, 2. Wow, man. Okay, so that, yeah, I just messed all that up too. Right, these are y values, these are not x values. Outputs, not inputs. Sorry, so don't center around x equals e to the first. Center it around x equals 1. There we go. So we get x minus 1 raised to the 0, x minus 1 raised to the first, x minus 1 raised to the second, x minus, nope, minus 1 raised to the third. And again, like I said, now that our values, if we're trying to find f at 2, all of our values are going to be 1. Right, 2 minus 1. So we have a distance of 1 that we're calculating for all these values, which end up being the just the factorial portions again. I'm not doing that right. Nope, okay, I gotta clear the whole thing. Cool. Because this x equals 1 then means we're also calculating all of our, yeah, that was the problem. All of our coefficients are now evaluated at 1. Okay, let's try that again. C sub 0. Just like we had above, is going to be just the function evaluated at 1 in this case. So here we have f at 1 over 1 factorial. F at 1 is e to the first. That looks much better already. Plus, right, times x to the 0. Plus c1 is going to be f prime at 1 over 1, no, that's 0 factorial. Man, I am just really not paying attention tonight. I mean, how's that any different from any other night, but not the point. Alright, so c1 is equal to f prime at 1 over 1 factorial. So then we're going to get, again, e, take the derivative, it's still e, and evaluate at 1. So e to the first, again, over 1 factorial is just 1. So we can leave it there, or we can write it just to be consistent. Okay, and then that's times x to the first. Plus c sub 2 is going to be f double prime at 1 over 2 factorial. Well, this is, again, e to the first over 2 factorial times x. Oh, man, I did it again. Let's try that again. because we're evaluating at x equals 1, this is going to change some stuff. So this is not going to be x to the first, this is going to be x minus 1 parentheses to the first. That's better. This over here is now going to be x minus 1 parentheses squared plus e to the first over 3 factorial times x minus 1 to the third plus e to the first over 4 factorial times x minus 1 to the fourth plus etc. Okay, that's better. So our Taylor polynomials are going to keep increasing like this. Our initial value here, e to the first, is then going to be reflected in the rest of these functions, but the rest of these functions are the derivatives of that function are the same thing as the original. So it doesn't really help, right? That's just going to end up being the exact same thing. So we could pick a much more interesting function. Like g of x equals sine of x. And we're going to center this at x0 equals, so let's just say we want a particular value, so it's going to be x0 equals pi over 2, right? Let's do an easy value that we can get a lot of numbers for. So C0 in this case is going to be the function evaluated at pi over 2. So evaluated at pi over 2, our original function is sine of pi over 2, which is 1 over 0 factorial. Our C1 is going to be the derivative of the sine function. So this is going to be the cosine at pi over 2 over 1 factorial, which is 0. Cosine at pi over 2, we don't have a horizontal component. The derivative of the cosine is a negative sine, so this is now the negative sine of pi over 2 over 2 factorial, which is sine of pi over 2 is 1, so this is negative 1/2, or 1 over 2 factorial. We'll leave it in factorial form. C3 is going to be derivative of a negative sine is going to be a negative cosine over 3 factorial, which by the way is 0. C4 is going to be take the derivative of a negative cosine, you get a positive sine at pi over 2 over 4 factorial. Sine is going to be 1 over 4 factorial. All right, and this is going to keep going. So g of x, the sine of x, is going to be equal to an infinite series where we have here 1 over 0 factorial is still 1. This is going to be 1 plus, here we get, actually that's a minus, 1 over 2 factorial times x minus pi over 2 raised to the second power plus 1 over 4 factorial times x minus pi over 2 raised to the fourth power. This is going to alternate signs and increase only on even degrees. So you can see over here our even coefficients, even subscripted coefficients, are all non-zero. The odd subscript coefficients are all 0. This is going to continue that way because every other one is going to be a cosine. Cosine of pi over 2 is 0. So this is going to be a negative 1 over 6 factorial times x minus pi over 2 raised to the 6th plus 1 over 8 factorial times x minus pi over 2 to the 8th minus, and then this is going to continue. Again, the sign, when it is focused around this particular point, is going to continue as such. Interestingly enough, this is also the exact same thing as taking the cosine at x equals 0. And actually, we know that because if you do sine at x minus pi over 2, that's a cosine. Alright, it's a cosine, it's not necessarily the cosine. But at any rate, we're going to end up with a sine function here, which is now generated as a Taylor polynomial. This is a polynomial. You can then figure out what the values of, say, what is the sine of, I don't know, nearly 1 to 2 ratio, so 3 pi over 7. If you want to know what the sine of 3 pi over 7 is approximately, 3 pi over 7 is somewhat reasonably close to pi over 2. So we can plug in 3 pi over 7 for all of our x's. So 1 minus 1 over 2 factorial times 3 pi over 7 minus pi over 2 squared plus 1 over 4 factorial 3 pi over 7 minus pi over 2 to the 4th minus, and then we continue doing the same stuff. 1 over 6 factorial 3 pi over 7 minus pi over 2 parentheses to the 6th plus 1 over 8 factorial. This is the last thing I'm doing here, so 3 pi over 7 minus pi over 2 to the 8th. And then this is going to continue on forever. Again, you're going to determine how many terms you need for your particular thing. And this is a great way for a computer to be able to come up with the solution for, or the approximation for, the sine of 3 pi over 7. On a calculator like this, what do? You just tell it, if you're on the coding side of things, you tell it that I want you to keep finding this value until when you add the next term, it is more decimal places away than can fit on the screen. So if we increment the next one and it only adds something to like the 13th or 14th decimal place, doesn't matter. We're just going to print the first 12, let's say. And it doesn't matter how far out we go beyond that because all the rest of the terms will be smaller. So Taylor polynomials are kind of my thing when we start getting out into like Calc 2 land. And then it also is really helpful to use Taylor polynomials when you start getting into differential equations and saying like, well, I want to do this thing with this function, but it's a really nasty function, and what can I do with it? You can break it up as a power series, try to find a Taylor series if you can. If you can't, that's fine. You can do it without a power series, or you can do it without Taylor, just as a regular power series, and then try to solve the differential equation using that. It is an approximation, it is kind of a kludge, but if you're not going to be able to find it otherwise, that kind of works. I'd rather find an approximation than find nothing. All right. Does anyone have any questions? Either about stuff we did or something completely different, that's fine too. And Avs, if you wanted to ask something, feel free to just pop it in chat whenever. In theory, I might be the only one here, so if that is the case, we can do a power series on differential equation like y double prime minus 5y prime. This is probably going to go horribly, by the way. I just throwing it out there. Normally I want something that's not going to work nicely as anything else. Because if I can get this as some other kind of... if I can get this as something else, I would want to use it as something else. Oh yeah, that's why. Right. So we're not just doing simple stuff like putting numbers here. No, no, no. We're going to do something much more fun. Like putting a variable there. And of course, make this easy. So we'll let x0 be 0. All right, now, fair warning again, this may go horribly, and that's okay. It's been a semester, give or take, since I taught differential equations, so, sometimes I forget things. But the idea here is that we want to do a power series. So this is going to be k goes from 0 to infinity of a sub k times x to the k. So y prime is going to be, here the k is going to come down. So I'll let this be k a sub k times x to the k minus 1. When you take the derivative, you use the power rule. And that's true for all individual terms of this power function. But the thing is that we can no longer put k equals 0, because here that would mean that we have x to the 0 minus 1, or x to the negative first. That is not how this works. So this is going to be only k goes from 1 to infinity. And y double prime, similarly, is going to have infinite, but the k minus 1 is going to come down, and the k times a sub k times x to the k minus 2. And in this particular case, again, we can't have any exponents which are negative, so we've got to have 0. So k equals 2 to infinity is how that one's going to work. So how does all this work? Well, this says that our y double prime, which is what we just found here, is going to be listed out front. K goes from 2 to infinity of k minus 1 times k times a sub k times x to the k minus 2 minus x times the infinite sum as k goes from 1 to infinity, because we're replacing y prime, of k, a sub k, x to the k minus 1. If there is anyone out there who does have questions, feel free, interrupt me, it's fine. I'm just doing this for fun. Yes, I did say fun. And here we have a 2 plus 2x squared times the infinite sum as k goes from 0 to infinity of a sub k x to the k. This is all equal to 0. All right, one sec. All right. So now that we have this infinite series over here, what we're going to do is we need to combine all of these things. So this is a little bit, it's not that hard. It's a little gross, but it's fine. So we take the first one and we say that this is going to be k goes from 2 to infinity of k minus 1 times k times a sub k times x to the k minus 2. This negative x is going to go in because our sum is being incremented over k, not over x. So x is free to move in at any point it wants. So this is going to be a minus the sum as k goes from 1 to infinity of k a sub k x to the k minus 1 plus 1 that we just pulled in, so raise to the k, plus 2 times the sum, bring in x squared, same way we did all the other ones. K goes from 0 to infinity of a sub k x to the k plus 2. All this is equal to 0. Now, these have different k's. So one of the ways that you can resolve this is that you can re-index all of these. So you could decide that all of these are going to be on the same index. So rename k such that you end up with a 0 on both, or get a 0 on this side. So it's basically like k minus 2 is now just n. You're allowed to do that, but it changes all of the indices as you go through. The same stuff can be done with the other two. We already have a k equals 0 to start with, but our x is now our k plus 2 for its exponent, which is slightly inconvenient. So it's up to you to decide if you want to do this or not. You can let k plus 2 be equal to n, and then that means that n is going to go from negative 2 to infinity. Perfectly possible. Not necessarily recommended, but you know, it works. Or the other option is you let it fall where it may, and instead you make the indices the same right off the bat. So So if we use this, I'm going to call it index reconciliation, where basically we just want k going from 2 to infinity on all of these, and we don't care about anything else. So this is going to say that we want the infinite sum as k goes from 2 to infinity to appear on all of these indices. This is going to be, again, k minus 1 times k times a sub k times x to the k minus 2 minus, now here we actually have k equals 1 is where we're starting. So if we let k equal 1, we're going to get a term out. So if k equals 1, we get a minus 1 a1 x to the first. Then minus the sum as k goes from 2 to infinity. It's the rest of the numbers. K, a sub k, x to the k. And then plus 2 times, might as well do quantity, that's fine. X equals 0, or sorry, k equals 0. We can let that go in here, and that becomes a sub 0 times x to the k is 0 plus 2 is now 2, x squared. Then the next term, k equals 1, we get a sub 1, x to the third. Okay, then we get plus 2 times the sum as k goes from 2 to infinity, which is, again, the rest of the terms. A sub k, x to the k plus 2. And all that is equal to 0. This means that now we can take all of the individual sums and say we're just going to move them all together. So this is going to be the sum as k goes from 2 to infinity of k plus 1, or k minus 1, times k, times a sub k, times x to the k minus 2, minus k, a sub k, x to the k, plus 2, a sub k, x to the k plus 2. Then we get the terms that we took out. So a plus 2a sub 0 x squared. Now let's go back. Make that minus a1 x to the first plus 2a0 x squared plus a sub 1 x to the third. And all of that is equal to 0. All right, so this is where it gets a little ugly. Little, it's fine. At this point, what we're going to say is that every single term that is ever going to feed out, every term that will feed out a x to the first power must have all of its coefficients sum up to 0. Because on the right-hand side, we have not just 0, but this is like 0x to the first plus 0x squared plus 0x to the third. All right, all of those have to be 0. So all terms that could possibly have x to the first need to be brought together and then dropped in here and said that the sum of them must be equal to 0 of them, right? 0x to the first, 0x squared, 0x to the third, etc. So this is why I don't necessarily like the index reconciliation, is that we are coming through here and we've got 3 different powers. Let's rewrite this in different colors, because that's much more interesting. All right, let's just get rid of this. That's fine. All right, so here in this particular one, again, we're going to do exponent reconciliation next. But these are 2 different ways to go about it. I prefer exponent, quite frankly, just because it gets everything together that needs to be together. It is a little bit weird at the beginning because you're messing with the indices, not like this one, where you're just like trying to get individual sums to have the same indices. No. The exponent one, you have to actually manually configure this, so it gets a little weird. But depending on your bookkeeping style, you could like one or the other. And it doesn't matter to me, right? So as long as you understand how it works, it's all good. So this stuff, if we plug in k equals 2, we're going to end up with 2 minus 1 is 1 times k equals 2, a sub 2, x to the 2 minus 2 is 0, minus, all right, so let's have this be k equals 2 like that. Not like that. All right. Okay, so k equals 2 on this line. Let's just get this over with. It's going to need to do it eventually. Okay, so plug in 2 over here, we get a minus 2 a sub 2 x squared plus 2 a sub 2 x to the 4th. Okay, so then if k equals 3, we end up getting k minus 1 is 3 minus 1 is 2 times k is 3, a sub 3, x to the 3 minus 2 is now 1, minus k is 3, a sub 3, x to the 3rd, plus 2a sub 3, x to the 5th. Now this is going to be just a pattern. So if you do k equals 4, this is going to be 3 times 4 times a sub 4 x squared minus 4 a sub 4 x to the 4th plus 2 a sub 4 x to the 6th. And k equals 5 is going to be 4 times 5 times a sub 5 x to the 3rd minus 5 a sub 5 x to the 5 plus 2 a sub 5 x to the 7. Now our lowest term here is getting to the 3rd power, so I'm going to do one more just to get it up to the 4th. Right, we've got 3rd power here, so we'll do one more. So 6 is going to get us 5 times 6 a sub 6 x to the 4th minus, nope, that's a 6 a sub 6 x to the 6th plus 2 a sub 6th x to the 8th. Okay. All of this minus a sub 1 x to the first plus 2a sub 0 x squared plus a sub 1 x to the third equals 0. So all of this taken together, plus the stuff we knocked out earlier, is all going to be equal to 0. And again, all of the individual similarly exponented terms must all add up to the same 0 at the end. All right, we only have one term that has x to the 0 in it. It's this one right here. So this is going to say that a sub 2 x to the 0 must be equal to 0x to the 0. Therefore, a sub 2 must be equal to 0. It's the only way it works. All right, all terms with an x to the first in them. So there's one there, and there's one here. Those must be added together to also get 0. So this is going to be a 6, a sub 3, x to the first, minus a sub 1, x to the first, must equal 0, x to the first. Therefore, this stuff must equal 0, and therefore 6a sub 3 is going to be equal to negative a sub 1, or a sub 3 is going to be equal to negative a sub 1 over 6. Going to need that in a bit. A sub 2 equals 0 there. Okay. Now that we've done x to the first, now we need to do x squared. So we've got an x squared term here. We've got an x squared term here. We've got an x squared term here. So, how's that one going to work? That's going to say that we have a negative 2 a sub 2 plus 12 a sub 4 plus 2 a sub 0 all times x squared must equal 0x squared. We already know that a sub 2 is 0 from over here. So that's gone. Then the relationship exists between these two terms. We want to get the higher term in terms of the lower term. So this is going to be 12 a sub 4 equals a negative 2a sub 0. Because again, this was all going to be shifted to the other side where we had a 0 before. So a4 is going to be equal to negative 2 divided by 12 is a negative 1/6 a sub 0. All right, now we're going to go back and do the same thing with a sub 3. Or nope, sorry, x to the third. So with x to the third, we get a 20 a sub 5 minus 3 a sub 3 plus a sub 1. Well, we already know a sub 3 is equal to negative a sub 1 over 6. And again, this is equal to 0x to the third. So 20 a sub 5 minus 3 parentheses negative a sub 1 over 6 plus a sub 1 equals 0. So 20 a sub 5. Here this is going to be a 1/2 and it's positive. And then plus 1 is going to be 3/2. So positive 3/2 a sub 1 equals 0. Again, we want to get the higher term in terms of the lower term. So this is going to tell us that a sub 5 is going to be equal to a negative 3/2 a sub 1 divided by 20. And then we can multiply both top and bottom by 2, which gets us negative 3 up top. A sub 1 divided by bottom is 40. No common factors there, so a sub 5 equals this thing. All right, and last term, because I said this, I was going to do this. We've got x to the 4th. I am repeating colors, I apologize. So for x to the 4th, we've got a 30, a sub 6, a minus 4, a sub 4, a plus 2, a sub 2, and there's no other terms with x to the 4th in it, is equal to 0 x to the 4th. Apologies to anybody who's colorblind out there. Should maybe have thought about that ahead of time. All right, we already know, again, a sub 2 is 0. We also have a sub 4 from earlier. So 30 a sub 6 minus 4 parentheses negative a 0 over 6 is equal to 0. This is going to be a positive. This is going to be 2/3. And we're going to shift it to the other side and make it negative. So 30 a sub 6 is equal to 2/3 negative 2/3 a sub 0. And divide everything by 30, which is going to get us a sub 6 over here. It's a negative 2 a sub 0 over 90. And then we can divide, make it 1/45, negative 1/45. So now what do we know? Well, we have a sub 0 and a sub 1 are basically the base cases. So those are going to be numbers that we don't have numbers for. They're just going to be coefficients. Then we have a sub 2, which is 0, a sub 3 in terms of a sub 1, a sub 4 in terms of a sub 0, a sub 5 in terms of a sub 1, a sub 6 in terms of a sub 0. When we bring all of this together, this is going to tell us that the original power function that we had up above, y, was going to be equal to, again, the infinite sum as k went from 0 to infinity of a sub k x to the k, which was a sub 0 plus a sub 1 x plus a sub 2 x squared plus a sub 3 x to the 3rd plus, and then we keep going out. Well, we now have out to a sub 6 all determined. So y is equal to a sub 0, don't know what it is, plus a sub 1 x plus a sub 2 is 0, x squared, plus, we'll do a minus, a sub 3 is going to be negative a sub 1 over 6, so minus a sub 1 over 6 x to the third. A sub 4 is the next one here. This is going to be a minus a sub 0 over 6 x to the fourth. Okay, might have enough room, that's fine. Five is going to be another minus 3/8 sub 1 over 40. This is x to the fifth. And x to the sixth down here is a minus a sub 0 over 45, x to the sixth. So this is our solution, and this does continue on forever. It is an infinite solution, or infinite series. If you don't like it in particular, you can also shorten this up. You can say that, well, all terms that have a sub 0 in them can be combined. So a sub 0 times the quantity, 1 from the first term. All right, this has a sub 1, a sub 1, a sub 0 here is going to be a negative 1/6 x to the fourth. A sub 0 is here, minus 1/45 x to the sixth. Plus dot dot dot. Plus a sub 1 times, here we have x, minus, here we have a negative 1/6 x cubed. Here we have a minus 3/40 x to the fifth. And again, we can continue this on forever. So our y function can be approximated, or we can find the power series equivalent to it, because again, if it is infinitely long, it is equivalent based on this. So any y value that we want, we can plug in the x value for the appropriate value, and there you go. We're going to get something. And those of you who understand differential equations, we started with a second order differential equation, y double prime, and we ended with two unique individual solutions, which were multiplied by some sort of constant. So we have a0 times a solution plus a1 times a solution. These are now linearly independent. Right, those terms are linearly independent from each other. And any one of them will also be a solution to the original. So if you just take the stuff for a0 or you just take the stuff for a1, you're going to get a solution. You take them both, you're going to get the solution that uses both of them combined. All right, now I did promise exponent reconciliation. Maybe that was a mistake. All right. So with exponent reconciliation, this is a little bit different. We're going to try to make our exponents in here identical all the way across the board. So we have k goes from 2 to infinity. K minus 1 times k times a sub k times x to the k plus 2, k minus 2, sorry, minus sum, k goes from 1 to infinity, of k, a sub k, x to the k, plus, we're going to run out of room here, 2 sum, k goes from 0 to infinity, of a sub k, x to the k plus, no, k plus 2. Awesome. Barely made that one. Okay. And all of that is going to sum up to 0. So with XON, hello? Oh no, wait. Yep, never mind. That's not a person. Or rather, XON is the artist for this particular music. Oh well. Anyway, so coming in here, we say we want the same exponent for all of these things. So we're going to let k minus 2 be equal to n, and therefore k is going to be equal to n plus 2. For our second one here, we already have x to the k, so we're going to leave it as is. Over here in the last case, we have x to the k plus 2, so we're going to let, over here, let k plus 2 be equal to n, and therefore k equals n minus 2. Okay, now, in the first case, this is going to take this and say sigma, we're taking the sum, as here, we can subtract the 2 from both sides of this equation because it is an equation. And we get k minus 2 equals 0. K minus 2 equals n, and n equals 0. So k minus 2 equals 0, and k minus 2 equals n. These two facts together get us that n equals 0. Okay, k minus 1, we could, in theory, again, subtract 1 from both sides here. This gets us k minus 1 is equal to n plus 1. So that first term is going to be n plus 1. You could have also said, okay, k is equal to n plus 2, so n plus 2 minus 1 is going to be n plus 1. K is n plus 2. A sub k is n plus 2 times x to the k minus 2 is n. Then minus sigma, take the sum as we go from k is 1 to infinity of k times a sub k times x to the k. So we still have the same exponents, or at least they look the same. And the last term here, plus, this is k equals 0. And so therefore k equals n minus 2. Or we can take this and add 2 to both sides. So however you want to look at that. K plus 2 equals 2, and therefore n equals 2. Going off to infinity. We have a 2 out front, still a constant. A sub k equals n minus 2, so a sub n minus 2 times x to the n. All summed up to equal 0. Okay. Now, we can't recombine these because now our indices are all different. However, in this particular case, we could just let, I should have done that. Okay. Let k just be equal to n for our second case. So then that's going to replace all these. Probably should have done that. So anyway, middle thing doesn't change. They're all in terms of n now. The one that's 0, we can increment over 0 and 1. So here, if n is 0, we get 1 times 2 times a sub 2 x to the 0 plus, if we have 1 for n, this is going to be 1 plus 1 is 2 times 1 plus 2 is 3 times a sub 1 plus 2 is 3 x to the first power. Alright, n plus 1, n plus 2, a sub n plus 2, x to the n. Here we also get a minus n, a sub n, x to the n, but we have to also increment this over the 1, so we get a minus 1 times a sub 1 x to the first. So that's going to be in there too. Then over here, we're going to get the last term as well, so this is inside of the sigma plus 2 a sub n minus 2 x to the n. And that all sums up to 0, again, once we figure all this stuff out. So these are going to get us x to the 0 term here is 2 a sub 2 x to the 0 plus 6 a sub 3 minus 1 a sub 1 parentheses x to the first. Plus, now we do this thing. When we do n equals 2, we get 3 times 4. N equals 2. It's just a note, right? If n equals 2, we get 3 times 4 times a sub 4. And this whole line is going to all be x squareds. Minus n equals 2, a sub 2 x squared, plus 2, a sub 2 minus 2 is 0, and that's x squared. Plus, parentheses, if n equals 3, then we go with 4 by 5 by a sub 5 minus 3 a sub 3 nope 3 a sub 3 plus 2 a sub 1 x to the third. Alright, and all of this should look familiar because we're doing literally the same thing that we were doing back here. So we're getting all these same numbers over again, but now just in this different format over here. Right, so 6a sub 3 minus a sub 1, we've got that over here as 6a sub 3 minus a sub 1. We've got 2a sub 2 equals 0, so 2a sub 2 equals 0. For the x squareds, we've got 12a sub 4. Here we go, right here. 12a sub 4 minus 2a sub 2 plus 2a sub 0. So we've got all that. And the next line down, this was 20a sub 5 minus 3a sub 3. Got that, plus a sub 1. 1a sub 1. Uh-oh. Should that be a 2? X to the third. Right there. Oh, that should be a plus. Right. Good with that. Yep, there's a 2 there. 2a sub 1 x to the third and a 2a sub 1 x to the third there. Okay, cool. This highlights the importance of checking your work. Oh no, does that mean we're off by a whole bunch? Man. Alright, so here this is going to be 2a sub 1 x to the third, which is a 2a sub 1 here, which is 2 plus a half is going to be 5 halves here. Okay, it's not so bad. Five halves. It's going to make this a 5 over 40, which is going to be a 1 over 8. Okay, so that does change it quite a bit, but okay. But either way, right, this takes a little bit of thinking, and sometimes you don't quite know what you're doing. That's okay. This method over here requires a little less thinking at the beginning, but at the same time there's this huge like pain in the rear part of having stuff that has all sorts of different exponents on it. So, you know, it kind of depends on what you like. All right. I think that's going to be me for the night. If I have not fried your brain, let me know. I will endeavor to do so later. And let's set up a raid. As soon as I remember which window it is. Yep. All right. I think our usual math thing to do is to raid Jason Charles Miller because he's awesome. It is Whatever You Want Wednesday, so tonight you will be able to request music from Jason Charles Miller, former, I guess? I don't know, lead singer of Godhead, also guitarist, and at this point I would say frontman, but I don't know the band well enough. Oops. Other people that I have on my list, I have Aaron Stebe and Dev the Devastator, who are, let's see, Aaron's just chatting at the moment. She's probably going to be playing, what has she been doing lately? Spider-Man, the remastered Spider-Man. And Dev is doing End Zone, A World Apart. So if you're interested in checking them out, feel free. We are, as I said, going to check out Jason Charles Miller, who is really great. Just, you know, take a listen to him. He does almost anything. He can play almost anything. So, thank you very much for coming. My name is Obi-Wan Pez. This is N Simplex Pachinko. I hope you've had a good time. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, and I will attempt to get back to all that stuff in future sections. So, good luck, have a good weekend, and hopefully catch you Friday for my game stream. Have a good night.